Hello, Mary Beth. You are up first.
Hey, hi Bart.
So, where do you play out of, Mary Beth?
Play out of Sequan Casino. That's one of the few out in the East County. It's my favorite, but I do play at others.
East County, and where? In what state?
San Diego?
In California?
Yes.
Oh, Saquon. Okay, so one of the Indian casinos, Pachanga, Morongo, all that stuff, right? Down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have like Hamul, and they also
Right.
have like a card club called 7 Mile, and
Yep.
then Ocean's 11, of course, up the coast.
Yep. My buddy Jake plays at Ocean's 11 all the time. So, what's the typical game that you play in for the most part?
Well, it's a 2-3. Right now it's nine-handed. They just changed that. It's a 400 cap.
Okay.
This hand has no straddle.
Okay. So, you're playing two, three, $400 buy-in max, and how deep are you for this hand?
So I cover them, but the effective stack is 236,
Okay.
and I do have two Velens. So the other Velen he has 300.
I appreciate you using the term effective correctly, Mary Beth. You'd be
Well, thank
surprised at how
you.
often we can't get that right on the show. But all right, so 236 effective with the primary villain, the other guy's 300. You cover them both. Okay, let's start us off pre-flop.
So under the gun, he's an unknown Velen to me, though. Somebody at the table did know him, and he open raises to 15, and that is pretty much a standard open raise for us.
Okay, so he raises it up to 15. So under the gun here to 15. Okay.
And I'm in the cutoff, and I look at red jacks.
Wow. All right. So Mary Beth in the cutoff. So it's folded to you. Hero with red jacks, and obviously I would assume that you're almost always three betting here, right?
Yes, well, yeah, it definitely is a consideration for me. But the button had sat down like about an hour earlier, and he had made a play that I thought was sort of weak. And I'm like, okay, he's sort of fishy, maybe. I don't know. So I'm definitely wanting to three bet. That's my first inclination.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, I think, do I want to keep him in? And the small blind and the big blind haven't shown aggression.
Mm-hmm.
So I take the passive route and I decide to call.
Well, so there's a couple of things on here. What I would say to anybody who's playing at these stakes is like there's nothing wrong with kind of keeping it simple and as baseline as possible. And I'm not talking about not making exploits, but what you are saying is actually valid in some certain situations where you might call with some strong hands to keep bad players in behind you. And also, it's an under the gun open. So it's not 100% three bet from the cutoff with Jack Jack, like it might be a little bit closer from like +1. So there is merit to what you're saying, but I like to kind of keep it simple at the small stakes and just kind of try to play a pretty much a winning strategy where, okay, I'm ahead of this guy's range. People open far too much. I'd like to get, especially with Jack Jack. I mean, I'd almost rather, if you're trying to keep somebody in or have somebody do something stupid, I think a better candidate to do this would be with Ace Ace. I don't want people to get into bad habits though, because you always want to get value. Whenever I feel like I want to slow play something, I just kind of take it back and I'm like, well, I could just min raise or make a really small bet. I could make it 30 here with a big hand. The issue with Jack Jack and calling here too is if you're bringing other people in, you're inherently going to see an overcard on the flop. Obviously not always, but it's a hand that needs a little bit of protection. And then when you call, I do feel like, I mean, 2-3, you might give some guys in the big blind like a price to come in. So, like I said, I have no qualms about your thought of that, especially if a guy from behind is a maniac. Like where I might do this specifically with your hand is maybe if the button had just gotten stacked and you thought that he was just going to go all in. You're basically trapping here. Like you're calling, so the button's going to jam all in. That doesn't necessarily sound like the situation here. So for the most part, I would just say kind of keep it back to basics, get value from your hand. I would probably be three betting here, just a ton. But okay, so you call. What does the button do behind you?
So before I move on, I've got to ask you, if I did raise,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think that the under the gun may go over the top, right? And maybe four bet me.
Right.
And then I think to myself, well, that would sort of make an easier decision for me because Mark says a lot that they telegraph their hands. But yeah, I did take the passive route, and I did flat, and then the button he flats too, and the small blind and the big blind call.
Okay.
I mean, they fold.
All
They
right.
fold.
So is there another guy in your life that's a poker teacher named Mark, or did you mean my
No, Mark Boone.
Oh,
Mark Boone.
okay. Yeah. No, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Mark Boone.
so what I was going to say here is that in line with what you were saying about if you raise and then he comes back over the top and it makes it easier for you, we're not necessarily thinking about all the time like making a hand easier. I would look at that as a situation where, especially at 2-3, that would be like a raise fold. Just like when we have raise folds post flop for value, it's a very powerful tool that a lot of low stakes players don't have in their arsenal. If you think the under the gun guy would definitely call with worse, you can raise. And a lot of times these guys are only going to come back over the top with like aces or kings as a 4-bet. And that is a very viable line to raise and then fold. So it's not an absolute disaster. It's probably the line that I would probably end up taking quite a bit at 2-3. I mean, you're kind of shallow. I'd have to evaluate how often I think somebody's going to play like ace king aggressively too, because you might get priced in if you go to like say 60 and then he jams. But I mean, it's a straight raise fold for value. But anyways, you call, the button calls, the blinds get out of the way, right? So now you're 3 ways.
Yeah, I'm 3 ways, and that raise fold concept is one that I definitely have to implement more.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. It's definitely like a cornerstone of kind of what we teach on Crush Live Poker. All right, so I'm going to call the pot 40 after the drop. Okay.
Yeah, so the flop is 9, 8, 7, and it is rainbow.
Okay. So 9-8-7 rainbow. Okay.
Yeah, and I think to myself that this is definitely better for my range, for the caller's range, than for his pre-flop open raise range.
Sure. It probably is if you're a flat caller. Yeah, absolutely.
So he comes out and he bets 45 into a pot of like roughly 45.
Yeah, that's interesting because unless this guy, as somebody had pointed out to me when I said in Vegas, you came up with the term out to lunch, and it wasn't intentional. I think I meant out to left field and it turned into out to lunch. And I've been saying out to lunch, meaning like the guy's clueless. You're normally not going to see a guy c-bet this board with like ace king into 2 people for 45. Usually this means that they have something. Now, whether that could be like an overpair, could it be 10-10 that you're ahead of some other hands? I mean, I think you have to continue here because you've got a gut shot. Even if you're behind to an overpair, you still have 6 outs, and your call might shut everything down here. But when somebody comes out and bets this amount, and you always know like it's an overpair, the problem with that bet size for that guy is he never has any bluffs, if that's the case. And then you can just like safely fold some weaker hands like ace 8, even ace 9 in a given situation. Here, it's not necessarily clear that you can still sometimes be ahead, but you also have equity here as well. It's interesting though, because of the stack sizes, that if you call, the pot will be like 130, and you said you only started with about 236 effective. So he's probably only going to have about 160 left. So there's going to be like a pot size bet going to the turn. You can get a little bit awkward in these small stakes games with effective stack sizes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought it was definitely a bigger bet. And I was like, dang, I think he's really telling me that he's got an overpair for sure.
I mean, were you ever thinking about folding here? I mean, if you thought that he absolutely had an overpair, you can easily make a case for folding, especially when you have a guy behind you too that can be doing something that can also hit his range as well.
Well, I like the fact that I had the jacks and that I was blocking the top end of the straight. So I decided I'm just going to peel one more, peel this, at least one street
Mm-hmm.
and see what the button does.
So you make the call. Okay.
Yeah. And the button thinks just, for, 15 seconds of that. And he does call too.
Wow. So the button also calls. Which is the guy that with the 300 is the button?
No, he's the under the gun.
The under the gun is the guy with the 300. Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys put in 135 here on the flop. The pot is now 175. on 987 rainbow and it's still multi-way and you've got pocket jacks. Okay.
So the turn is a 4,
Okay.
and it's now a complete rainbow board.
Okay.
And so that took away some of the decisions, for like flush draws.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I thought that this was a better card for me than the under the gun razor, and also a better card for the button.
I actually think the card's inconsequential though, because 5-6 was already there, right? Like the 4 brings in 5-6 as a straight, but it was already there. I actually consider this a blank. A 5 would not be a blank because that would be a one-liner to a 6. But I think a 4 through a deuce is a blank. So if I was under the gun and I took a sort of a robust like approach to these levels where I said, I think people are raising off with like 2 pair or better here. I've got kings or aces. This card will not slow me down if I'm under the gun. That would be from my perspective. Now, I might hesitate and think maybe somebody's slow playing something, but just in terms of this card, it doesn't really change that much. It's actually a blank, especially when you say on the backdoor side it's rainbow too.
Yeah, and I like what you said about slow playing, because then the under the gun, he bets 45.
Oh, wow. So he bets the same bet again here?
Yes, and I can't remember your theory about the same bet. Does it apply here?
I would say that it probably does apply here somewhat. Now, this whole same bet concept comes into play usually when somebody has raised you, like somebody's check raised you on the flop and you were the pre-flop raiser, or they sort of raised you in position. But it can still apply here too. And normally it is a bet that is kind of scared, cognizant of the turn card, or is just so scared that they were called because they made such a big bet or a check raise on the flop that they don't really know what to do. I think in this case, it falls into category number 2, where it probably is weakness, quote unquote, in the sense that it's not 2 pair or better. And the reason why he's making the same bet again is because he doesn't really know what to do. And he's probably a little bit frightened by the fact that both of you guys called. That does not mean, though, that he still doesn't have like queens, kings, or aces. It's just the fact that both of you called. The crazy part, though, now is the pot's like 220 and it's 45 for you to call. If this guy had come out and like potted the turn, Mary Beth, I think you could make a case for folding, and it would be a very strong case. Here, it's just like, oh God, the pot's 220, it's 45 for you to call. You're getting almost 5-1. As long as he doesn't have, I mean, again, you're ahead of 10-10, but you still have like 6 outs, which, is probably you're about, 1 chance in 7 of improving, which means you would need to get 6-1 from direct equity. You're getting 5-1 right now, and I still wonder if there's ever a chance that you might still have the best hand. So it sucks that the button's behind you, but I don't know. Like it's weird. I think you still have a call here for given this sizing.
Yeah, Bart, I have the pot at 180.
Okay, yeah, I had taken out $5 for the drop, but that's all. Yeah.
Yeah. So with it 180, my first thought immediately was, hey, he's, indicating maybe weakness, or is he, inducing me maybe to raise, which if I did raise, it'd have to be like a min raise because of the, shallowness of the stack, button stack.
Well, I mean, I think that I think my take here is that you bring up something that I hadn't even gone over in this sense where if you think that he's a little bit scared here, but he still has a lot of overpairs, I suppose you could make a case for actually semi-bluffing your hand here, knowing that your hand is not good. But if you think that a guy would release an overpair, we sometimes do that on flush draws and straight draws. Here you've got a gut shot plus like 2 outs to your jacks. The only thing is that I do question, even if a guy's starting off with 300, is he really going to fold if you were to raise? Plus the fact you have to deal with the once in a while the button sandbagging something behind you, although it's probably unlikely. That's kind of why I leaned towards call. If you were to say, I can get this guy to fold out aces and kings like a bunch, like 70, 80% of the time, something like that, you could make a case for a semi-bluff. But at these stakes, I just don't see a whole lot of players, fold over pairs. I don't know what your take on that is, or if you have history with this guy in particular.
Yeah, he's an unknown player to me, and, you're absolutely right because I am, I'm in my early 60s, I let my hair go gray a bit early, and, guys, until they get to know me, they think maybe I'm on the tighter side, right, as a profile.
Hmm.
So yes, it did cross my mind that maybe I can get them to fold, but it's usually the better players that will fold over pairs in this situation.
Right. But I think that those are two viable considerations: jam as a bluff, as a semi bluff, but I do lean towards call here at this level.
And that's what I did. Yeah, I did flat. I could just call.
And then what did the button do behind you?
He thought about it
Mm.
for maybe 15 seconds, 30 seconds. He was definitely pondering. And then he called also.
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, what do you think the button has behind you here?
Well, because he earlier he had made, that weird play, I felt that if he had two pair plus,
Hmm.
he would have telegraphed the strength of his hand and likely, shoved.
Right.
That was my thought.
Hmm.
And so since he called, in a way, I was like, well, does he have 6-5, queen jack, and slow playing and trying to get more money out of under the gun?
I think at this point, especially when you said the button probably started right with like 236 behind, I think he's just getting all the money in if he was slow playing something on the flop. I think it's all going in now. I think the more likely holdings, if you take a look at the way that this board is sort of textured, is pair plus straight draw. Whether that is like 10-9, 8-10, 7-6, which would probably be a pretty bad overcall, but you'll see it at this level. I think it's a lot of pair plus straight draw when the button tanks and then calls. Now, according to my math, you guys put in 135 here on the turn, so the pot's probably 310, my math, 315, your math. And this guy's put in like 105, the preflop raiser, so you guys probably have about 200 left, and then the button has, 125 or something like that, 135 left. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I have it like, the UTG has like 240 and the button has like, roughly 131.
Okay.
And then again, one of the thoughts that went through my mind is this a lot of money for the button? I'm not sure. I've never played with him before, but not that he's scared money, but maybe this was a lot of money for him. I'm not sure. So anyway, the river
Yep.
is a 4,
Okay.
which obviously pairs the board.
Yep.
And very surprisingly, the under the gun checks.
Actually,
At least it was surprising to me.
I think that's not surprising. No,
Okay.
no, yeah, I don't think that that's surprising. And I think that hopefully you and some other Crush Live Poker subscribers, YouTube subscribers, website subscribers, if they were in the under the gun spot, I would read this hand if I was under the gun. If I had an overpair, I would absolutely bet again. I would absolutely bet again here for value. I don't think that you or the guy behind you are slow playing. If I've got aces up here, if I've got kings up on that 4 pairs, I'm golden, and this is the way to maximize. However, typical 2-3 opponents, this is not surprising to me at all, especially consistent with the fact that he down bet sort of on the turn, that he's scared. He is checking here if he has an overpair, probably to check call. Now, with that being said, you definitely have showdown value. You almost always have the best hand against the button. And I think that you can sometimes have under the gun beaten. Maybe he does have 10-9. Maybe he does have pocket tens. But your hand has enough showdown value where you absolutely don't need to turn it into a bluff. And it would be way too thin, I think, to go for value here, because I think you're actually going to value own yourself a fair amount against under the gun. If you shove all in, you're going to get called by queens, kings, and aces. So your hand falls in between. I am all for going for thin value in a certain situation. But the way that this one went down, I think under the gun beats you a lot here. And you just want it to get checked through and hope you win against some form of a weaker range from under the gun.
Yeah, you're so right. I think I was surprised because I'm in that category of I would have been betting. If I was
Well,
UTG,
that's
I
good.
would have bet.
That's
I
good.
may have shoved, right.
Sure.
So, and that's, thanks to the call-in show.
Yeah.
And I do, think about it for, 15, 20 seconds. And I concur, yes, I do have showdown value. Yes, my hand is a bluff catcher. And do I want to reopen the betting was something that I thought about too.
Well, the pot is so big. It's just, I mean, you only have like, less than a pot size bet left anyways. But I think you just hope to get to showdown. Did you check?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I checked.
I like that play. I like that play.
So then one of the other things I thought about when I decided to check was, now am I setting up the button to maybe bluff? I wasn't sure.
Well, I think that you are protected by it will be interesting if the button bets, though. I got to tell you, I don't know if that's going to happen with two jacks in your hand, but you're very, very protected at these levels in the fact that the button's going to check back pair plus straight draw almost always. Like he's not going to like turn 7-6 into a bluff here. It's just going to get checked through. So unless something really strange happens here, I would expect the button to check back here a lot. Did the button check back?
No, he thought about it for 15 seconds and then he shoved his remaining like 131 into the pot.
Interesting. So the button bets 131 all in. Now, Mary Beth, if the under the gun calls, you have a very easy decision, which is a snap muck, right? You can't
It's
overcall.
true.
So what did the under the gun do?
He snap folded.
Oh boy. All right. So UTG folds. Okay.
And he just flung his cards into the muck, like he was sort of disgusted.
Boy, I got to tell you here. So let's do some pot odds. I'm going to call it 130 all in just to make it even. The other guy folded out. So the pot 130 plus 310 is 440, and it's 130 for you to call. So you are getting over 3-1 here, meaning that you need to be good here 1 out of 4 times. Like I said, if you go back to my turn analysis, if you sort of listen back, and I said that I would feel like the button would want to get the money in if he slow played the flop on the turn because there's so many action killing cards. I think I'm going to look this one up, Marianne. And if the guy's got something really thick, so be it. But I just think that you're good here 1 out of 4 times. The other interesting thing about your hand specifically is you block like the hard nuts. You block the nuts. What I mean is like the really thick nuts, like Jack 10, right? You've got 2 jacks in your hand. So you start to think about like a hand that might just slow play all the way down, maybe like Jack 10, right? Because of the fact that maybe he wants a 6 to peel and get money from another 10. Once that 4 pairs though too, it's like all his 2 pair gets counterfeit. Not that I think that he would bet those types of holdings. The only thing that I see you losing here too, the thing that I would see you losing here too would be something like if once in a while he had slow played Jack 10, which we talked about being unlikely, or he somehow hit a 4, like he had like 10-4 suited, or like 9-4 suited, or 6-4, those are the hands that I would expect to see if you call and lose. But I think given the pot odds, I'm going to call. Now, let's see what the people in the live chat are saying. Yeah, they tend to, some people saying this. Some people saying call. I mean, she is getting over 3.5 to, 3.5 to 1 here. What did you end up doing, Mary Beth?
Yeah, I mean, it was the pot odds, and I did tank. I was sort of embarrassed because I did tank for like a minute. It's like, the pot odds are so very good. Like you said, I blocked the top end of the straight,
Right.
but the guy's a rec player, right? He's rec and he shoves. I think, well, is that the only way that he would win? In his mind, thinking, okay, I better shove. It's the only, chance that I have to win. And, I'm thinking, is this a punt if I call? But
Definitely not it's definitely not a punt because I told you that I probably would have called. Now, somebody else makes a good point is that it is actually kind of a strong shove when it looks like, because we already talked about you weren't betting Jack for value because we thought UTG was checking an overpair to check call. When this guy jams in here into 2 people, it's like, but again, it's small stakes. He might not know what he's doing. The other thing that's, like I said, a little bit troublesome is that I don't see people turn pair plus straight draws into bluffs here, which would mean that he would have to have something that would be unpaired, like Queen 10. You know what I mean? Something like that. but I think I still called. Did you end up calling?
I did. I
Mhm.
did end up calling.
And
He turns over Jack 9 offsuit.
wow, that is a hand that I absolutely did not expect. If someone
Yeah, and then the under the gun guy is so pissed. He's like, I folded aces, and he's cussing. I folded aces, and he's, making sure everybody knew that he folded that.
I
So,
don't know
and
if
I believe him.
you believe the under the gun guy folded aces?
I do because of my image.
I mean, yeah, but you haven't shown any strength in the pot. I will say this is an outlier hand, Mary Beth. So one of the things that I didn't go over because it would be so outlier is this guy shoving something worse for value than Mary Beth's hand? And I would say it's unbelievably unlikely. However, you always have to bring it back sometimes into the equation that there is, and I don't know if this is still a politically incorrect term. I used to call it spaz factor at the small levels where a guy just doesn't know what he's doing. Like that, this should be a check back all day, I would think, unless he knows he's turning his hand into a bluff. Let me ask you this question. When you called him, did he say like, oh, good call? Was he like disgusted when you called him? Did you get a read on that?
Yes, and he did. He did say good call, and he slowly rolled over, not like a slow roll, but he put his hand out, because I wasn't going to show mine. And he, turned it over. And, I actually may have thrown my jacks out because I try to do that real quick.
Uh-huh.
But he did say good call and threw his jack 9 out.
Wow, so he knew he was bluffing.
Yes, he did.
Well, that's quite interesting because again, like I had said back before, you're sort of protected by the fact that the guy with like 6-7 wouldn't bluff. If a guy is bluffing here with Jack 9, is he going to be bluffing here with 6-7, which is even worse, right? Because you could make a case here with Jack 9 that it has enough showdown value because you might be in there with pair plus straight draw that he beats, and under the gun, just might not have anything. But with 7-6, he can't beat you in between. So that's more of a candidate for a bluff because it has less showdown value. But that's a really interesting one. Marianne, I appreciate you being a longtime subscriber and calling this one, and I really do. Thank you very much.